And we are live.
That is awesome. All right, guys, we just switched on and we're seeing people join. I'm glad you guys all made it. Very excited. We're going to wait for everybody to arrive. In the meantime, guys, as you are joining in here, the way we'd like you guys to interact with us is through the chat functionality. If you look at the bottom of the Zoom window, it says chat. Would love to hear where everybody's dialing in from. If you don't mind putting in the city or the country or whatever it is, I'd like to see where you're from. All right, so there's Ralph from the Philippines. We got Xiao from Seattle. All right, Gustavo, San Francisco. You're close to me. Very nice. That's awesome to see. All right, Christian from Berlin. Yes, there you go. Fellow countrymen. This is awesome. So while we're waiting for everybody to join, we actually have a poll for you guys. We have a bit of a marketing research question. I think Connor here is going to throw it up on the screen for us.
Yep.
And hopefully you guys could quickly answer that. The question we have for you is like, do you wish you'd be more proactive? Specifically working from home, one of the traps that people will experience is that it's easier to be more distracted, easier to be more reactive, especially if we are in emergency mode and in survival mode, we end up being way too reactive. And would it be helpful to, to have a session on how to become more proactive when working from home? Because that's sort of the next thing that we wanted to jump in there. All right. Very nice. We have Sudi here dialing in from Memphis. That's awesome. And Cindy from Houston. Hey, Cindy, I hope you can hear me. I was born in Houston. So you're sort of from my hometown, and I'm a proud Texan. Although not too many people can hear that from my accent, right? All right, guys. Things are looking good. For sure. So yes, feel free to answer that poll while it's up. We're going to take it down soon, and we're very curious to see if you guys feel like that would be a great next topic for us. Hey, Jilly from Oxford. Very nice. All right. Okay. This is fantastic. So while we're still waiting for a few more people to show up here, we're going to also get going relatively soon. And the background of this session today is very simple. As many of you know, and I don't know how many of you guys had participated in our first webinar around how to survive and thrive working from home, which had a very strong focus on why you need to be wildly social when social distancing. We asked this question, what else would you want to hear about? And overwhelmingly clear was that people wanted to get a little bit more quality around how to deliver more deeper, more meaningful interactions in a world that we're living in right now, in a world where we're all remote. And so we went to work and we put together a very powerful coaching session on how to do that. It's going to be intense. It's going to have a lot of theory about the human condition, but we made sure that we put a lot of effort into bringing you ways in which it becomes more pragmatic. So Connor, I think we should get going. What do you say? Do you want to close the poll?
Yeah, let's close down this poll. Thank you everyone who voted. Appreciate that, guys.
And besides that, so questions, please ask us questions. I think this session will give you guys a lot of questions, and as they pop to your mind, just put them into the chat in the way you've just put in your location. And then basically, while Connor's going to go offline right now, turn off the video, he will be back later to help us figure out what questions you guys want to hear most. And with that, I'm going to start talking about how to have deeper, more meaningful interactions. The first thing I want to do is talk a little bit more about myself and what Mindmaven is. So I'm the CEO and founder of Mindmaven. We've been running Mindmaven for over a decade, and it is a executive coaching firm, and we focus on helping people reach their fullest potential, but we have a unique twist to it, and that is that we focus on relationships. We're saying because we have a very simple belief, and that is nobody that you know has reached their fullest potential without help from others. And it's one of those things that we don't pay enough attention to, because most of us think, hey, to be the best I can be, I need to focus on the hard skills that I have to deliver to my job, be it a lawyer, be it a recruiter, whatever it is. But in reality, the most important thing you have to focus on is relationships and how to manage them. And so we've been doing this for a very long time, and many clients came back to us and then told us that we gave them superpowers. And so eventually we're like, well, if so many people say, we probably stop believing it, we probably should use it. We should call it that. And so we're basically a coaching organization that helps executives, leaders in business unleash their superpowers. And we have 3 of them. And the 3 superpowers are leverage, intent, and fellowship. Leverage is really focusing on how you can get more leverage into your own responsibilities by working very effectively, by becoming better at delegating to a resource like an EA or a chief of staff or whoever you might be working with. And the cool thing is that we time over time again have been able to prove that we can save 8 to 10 hours a week out of a person's day-to-day life. And then of course that time needs to be used in a little bit more of a wiser way. And that brings us to the superpower of intent. It's the intentful use of time allocation, something that we often, especially in a reactive, emergency-driven type of environment that we're finding ourselves in right now, often struggle with. So it's all about how do we become more proactive? How do we focus on those things that actually move the needle most for our career, but also for the business we're in? And then dear to my heart is the 3rd power, superpower, and that's fellowship. And that's basically based on the simple notion that, to succeed in almost anything, you need other people to believe in you. You need people to join your cause, to want to follow you, preferably through hell and back. And not only just those that join you, but also those that in your network. We need these people to join, to want to support you with, for example, opportunities that they make available to you that can, make the difference between a nice outcome or an okay outcome and a great outcome. And so having said all of that, specifically around this notion of fellowships, it's all about relationships. And so one thing that I really need to make clear before I get into the nitty-gritty of deeper conversations, deeper experiences, is that you need to understand how we at Mindmaven see relationships. And the way we see relationships is in a very unique way, probably different than most people. What we say is relationships are defined by the sum of all past and present interactions that you have with someone. That is what makes the relationship come alive. And what I like about that definition is that it's extremely pragmatic. While relationships are abstract, interactions are something we have a lot of control over, and we can get good at. We can train to be amazing at it. And that leads me to a very simple golden rule. And if you take one thing away from this session today, it's this golden rule. And that is that you just have to become good at staging interactions with people that are being perceived as either meaningful, relevant, or valuable. As long as you make every single interaction be perceived in that way, you're going to be wildly successful, period, right? Now, that is easier said than done. And I think that's why we have a successful coaching practice. But let me start by talking about the biggest leverage item that we have in our cover. And it will sound, and you'll have this probably a few times as I go through this, like, duh, of course, it's about the mindset, right? Having the right mindset going into interactions is so critical in terms of impacting how the experience is and how both parties of that interaction, that conversation, that meeting feel about this particular experience in terms of it being more meaningful and deeper. So to do that well, we have to, again, first start and understand how we communicate, and we communicate through 3 simple channels. It's the words we choose, the content, right? It's the tone with which we deliver it through our voice. And of course, it's the visual signals we're sending, our body language, of course, but also the facial expressions in particular. Right? And this stuff, again, is something that not I came out with, but this guy called Albert Merberein. He was a professor of psychology at UCLA, and he did some really interesting studies on figuring out how these channels that we communicate through, how important they are in terms of their relative importance. And what it really means is, like, if I'm talking to you in person or through this video chat, like I'm talking to you guys right now, you are perceiving me 100%. You have my content, you have my voice, and you have the visual cues, mostly my facial expressions, right? How that's 100%. How much weight are you giving each of those when you are now perceiving me? And the answer, and some of those that participate in the older webinars will remember this, is actually a bit counterintuitive and surprising. And that is that only 7% represents the choice of your words, the content. The 93% is nonverbal cues. 38% is voice and the tone. And 55% is the visual experiences. And this is one of the reasons we enjoy meeting together so much. But I want to take it to this notion of verbal versus nonverbal cues. We in our society are way too strong on articulating things through verbal means, meaning the 7% of the content we choose. And that often leads to what is called uncongruent communication. And what exactly that is, I want to explain to you guys in this particular example. And so I want to see a show of hands here in a second. I'm going to read this to you, right? I'm very happy to see you, Ken. I like what you're saying, and I think we should put it into place right away. Show of hands. And by the way, you do that on the bottom where you can say raise hands in the Zoom window. Who thinks this is a positive message? Can I see a show of hands? All right. So Jeffrey is in, Sandy is in, Jennifer says yes. So a bunch of people saying yes. I think almost all of you guys are saying yes. This is perfect. Oh my God, look at you. Lots of people are saying, yes, this is a positive message. And I would agree, it is, just by looking at the content, a positive message. Now let's see what happens. Now this person is looking at you this way, right? So do you still think this is a positive message? If you don't think it's a positive message, or you think it's weird, lower your hand again. Like take the raise away to see how it is, right? And this is the point. What you're seeing here is that this person is looking at you in a different way than what the words are saying. And this is called uncongruent communication. The signals that you're sending outside of verbal communication, your tone and your facial expressions don't match the words you're saying, and you become unbelievable. You become phony in some ways. Let's take it a step further. What happens if the person is looking at this, right? Now, who of you thinks this is even more positive? Raise your hands again. If you look at this person, right? And this thing, not only is it now absolutely positive, it's super positive because you see those facial expressions. And the point I'm making here today is we more often are communicating in a, so let me take a step back. What I'm saying is this is congruent communication. You are saying words, and everything else you're sending and signaling that is nonverbal matches those words you say. It makes it believable, it makes it genuine, it makes it likable. It's exceptionally powerful. The sad truth, however, is that most of us are communicating like this more often than we should. And especially right now, when we are living in a state of heightened stress, of heightened anxiety, exhaustion, and all of this. And so my advice is basically make sure you communicate a lot more like this, become a lot more aware of it, communicate congruently. Now, how do we do this? Well, and this brings me back to this notion of mindset. The only way you can do that is by having the right mindset, by matching the way you feel to the words you're saying. So for example, if I'm saying right now to you guys this, hey, I'm really excited to give this presentation to you guys today. Well, let's get going, right? If I deliver it in this way, you guys don't believe me. Why? Because my cues are not matching. And so, but if I go in and say, hey guys, I've worked for 2 weeks on this with Connor. I'm really excited. You guys are the first one to get to see this. I hope you're going to love it. Let's get going. And I think you're going to believe me a lot more, right? And that is congruent communication. The problem with that is you don't have control over the nonverbal cues as much as you think you might. And so you can't fake your way through it. You got to have the right mindset. Let me give you another example. And this is super powerful. I love this stuff. think about it. There are people that are doing science on smiles, the science of smiles. It's a real thing. It exists. And they came up with two types of smile. One is the Pan-American smile you see here. And it's that polite smile that we have. It's the smile that we use to entertain. Hey, I'm supposed to look happy, so I'm going to look happy. It's the one that we dramatize. If any of you guys have been to a high-end restaurant before, you'll probably got that Pan-American smile with the service offering you very powerful, you know, a nice smile, but it doesn't feel real. It is there to basically serve you, and you're like, nah, that's how you feel about it, right? Now there's the Duchenne smile. The Duchenne smile is different. Get back to the Pan-American smile. What makes the Pan-American smile unique is that mostly we smile with just contracting the muscles around our mouth, right? Like the right? But that's it. The Duchenne smile, however, is a lot more. The Duchenne smile is basically when you smile and you get these eye crowds here, and you have a little gleam in your eyes, and the cheeks rise a little bit, and that smile is actually linked to true feelings of happiness, right? Duchenne was a French scientist in the 1700s who came up with us, and the whole point is that that's Duchenne smile is the smile that is the real smile that we will feel a lot more connected to. And you've all been there too. You've been to a shitty diner somewhere, but the woman that was working there was literally enjoying her job and truly smiling because she was happy at her job. You probably ended up percentage-wise giving that person a lot more tips than you did that person at the fine restaurant that you might have been, right? This stuff is also not stuff I came up with. There's a guy called Dacher Keltner who is actually doing this types of research on smiles. And basically the key point is you cannot smile the Duchenne smile if you want it. You can only do it if you are actually feeling happy. Why? Because we don't have voluntary control over those muscles part that make that smile go in that way. And so what's the point of all of this? Look, mindset drives everything when it comes to the experience. And the difference is stark. It could be, it could be that you're in a bad mindset for a certain meeting, and what you're delivering is a forgettable or average experience at best. And if you're on the right mindset, you can deliver an experience that actually people feel great about. And that's something we should be doing a lot of these days right now. So what's the key to getting into the right mindset? Well, the powerful truth about this is that you have almost 100% control over what you want to be in terms of your mindset. All you have to do is train your mind, just like you train your body when you go work out. And so the training is mindfulness practice, meditation, and so on and so forth. But while I recommend that to everyone, and luckily in the last few years, it's gotten really mainstream, I'm just delivering you a very powerful reason of why you should be doing it, not just because it makes you feel healthy and all of that. But I also came here to give you pragmatic advice. And so the pragmatic advice I'm going to give you right now is that what I call the 60 seconds of mindfulness. So before a interaction, before a meeting, before a conversation, do a mindset checklist. And the way you do it is very simple. Settle your mind first, refocus on the upcoming experience. I'm here to just meet with this person right now. And then basically calibrate then basically take a look and see how your mindset is right now. Am I tired? Am I exhausted? Am I full of fear? Those are probably things you are experiencing more than average these days. Become aware of that and say, okay, this is where I'm at. And then map it to what you need to be by getting excited about the interaction that's coming up. Ask yourself, well, why am I thrilled to be able to meet with this person? Or what am I looking forward to? To change that mindset to one that is inquisitive and interested. And that is my last tip. Cultivate your natural curiosity. Use it to be intrigued by what is coming and what you might discover, because it will help you be in the right mindset for that. All right. So very pragmatic, 60 seconds before any interaction, do that. Look, if you say, I'm too busy to even throw out a minute, that's fine. You can even do it in the beginning of the meeting while people are sitting down, coming online in the Zoom room. You can do it at any point in time. It's so quick and dirty. But the key thing is you want to use curiosity to get there. And so that's sort of the next point that I want to get into, leveraging curiosity, because it is the most powerful word in everything that we do, right? Curiosity, if you're a curious person, you can achieve a tremendous amount of of things. And so why is curiosity so important? Why am I saying curiosity? You know, like what the hell? Well, it's very simple. When you take genuine interest in others, you become genuinely interesting to others. And so this is taking us way beyond the idea of just delivering deep and meaningful conversations, right? It's linking this conversation we're having here directly to your professional success, because you want people to be interested in you because you become more relevant to them. And when you're more relevant to them, they're willing to do more things with you, including taking risks of you in some way or other. So the best thing to do that is to boost your natural curiosity. And the key word here is natural, because we all have it. It's part of the fundamental human condition, in my view. And so there's plenty of data and evidence that that's what makes us as a species very unique. That is that we can think and that we can be curious. Otherwise, we would have never wanted to go to the moon. And we did, right? And the funny thing is that among all of us, there are people living that actually have that curiosity at a power boost setting. It's the kids around us, because they are constantly asking questions and are insatiable with things they want to learn. The weird thing is that we as grown-ups seem to tend to lose it. And the two reasons for it, it gets hammered out of us. Don't ask so many questions, you know, that crap. But it also is that we make the big mistake of thinking we know the world now because we learn so much. And the fact of the matter is that we don't, because the moment we learn something, that information is outdated. All right. And so to become very good at being more curious, you have to feed it. You have to grow it like a little plant, like a little seedling, or like a little spark that comes up. And you have to be tender with it and make it something that you can draw out of yourself a little bit better. How do you do that? Very simple. Become aware of these little sparks of curiosity when you thought, like, ah, interesting, weird, why? You know, those little thoughts, right? And then when you have those thoughts, recognize them and then feed air to them. Give them oxygen by saying, interesting, I stumbled upon this. Why does it intrigue me? Well, why did I just think that? Right? And then as you get the answers to that, you go and you go deeper and you say, hey, you know, what makes me believe that? You start having an internal conversation about something that leads you to basically become more and more curious. And if you turn that into a habit, it becomes very powerful. The key thing that where most people will fail is that you don't even have the awareness of that small little spark. And so the best thing you can do is boosting your ability to do that. And to learn how to do that, we're going to turn to people among us that are amazing at that can teach us so much. And that's, of course, our children, right? And I don't know, can I, anybody who has their hands raised, drop their hands right now, please, because I see a lot of hands raised. Come on, drop it, guys. Let's clean up this house. Thank you very much. And so while you guys are dropping the hands, everybody else, who has ever heard about the concept, the mindfulness concept of a child's mind, right? Hands up here again. It's also known as the beginner's mind, right? It is a core tenet of the mindfulness practice, and it's powerful as hell. Why? Because what it means is you're going to start looking at the world from a perspective as if you are experiencing it from the first time. That's the skill there. Making yourself believe that this is really, really new. Right? So that's number one. You also will start eliminating assumptions on which we're running, because almost all assumptions we ever draw are wrong. You know, what we need to do is verify assumptions more than we do these days. And that's what a child would do. That's what a beginner's mind do. And we are asking questions as if everything we're seeing is new to us, right? That's what a child would do. They're like, you know, what's going on, right? We need to, you know, like a kid would ask you, hey, why is the sky blue? We stopped asking that question, but we should continue to ask those questions. The reason why is because it's just so powerful. If you start asking those questions, even if the answer you're getting is 90% the same as what your assumptions would have been, there are 10% that are caveats, that are differences, that are calibrations that will allow you to basically be even better in connecting with that person who's giving you information. Okay. So how do we get into this, you know, how do we pragmatically adopt the skill of a beginner's mind? It's easier than you think. All you have to do is start finding your trigger words that basically allow you to roll out the beginner's mind. It's words like interesting, intriguing, different, who, what, when, where. But even more powerful so are the thoughts that we have that lead to a potential beginner's mind. We always have them. I think multiple times a day you might actually have these thoughts. It's like, huh, that's intriguing. Why did she say that? Or I wonder what makes him feel that way. I never thought of it that way, right? And oh man, this person, she has a lot of conviction. I wonder why. Where's that coming from? What is fueling that? That curiosity leads to, leads to questioning things you might not question anymore. And the more we do that, I think the better. And so that leads me, of course, to what do we do when we have these thoughts? Well, what we need to start doing is asking questions. And this is my third pillar of deepening amazing experiencing. We call it questioneering, and it's the art of leading conversations through questions. You're going to ask me why, and the answer is twofold. I mean, there's so many answers, but the one that most people don't realize is if you guide a conversation through questions, you are almost guaranteeing that your talk time will be less than the person you're talking with. It could easily be a 30% to 70% ratio. And you're asking why that's good? Well, it's good because we all like hearing ourselves talk, right? It's a reality of how we are. And if you get somebody to make themselves talk and then you are guiding them through a question-based conversation where they might actually deliver their own value to themselves by having realizations, they're going to walk away thinking that that conversation was one of the better ones they've had this week, maybe even this month. So guide your conversations through questions. The other reason is, again, back to the whole point of curiosity. It's, if you ask questions, you show interest in people and then you become interesting to them. It's just that simple. All right, guys. So how do we ask questions? What are the right questions? Tip number one is here are a bunch of questions you can ask, right? And there are questions like, what are you working on these days? What do you do to recuperate? Hey, what did you recently learn that kind of was interesting? What blew your mind? If you had 3 hours a day, what would you spend them with? I don't care what the questions are, but if you look at all of those questions, you see one thing that they all have in common. Anybody know what that is? Write the quote, write into the quotes. If you do, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to do so. But they are all, yes, that's true. Somebody says they're all about you, but Susan, you got the prize. They're all open-ended, right? Look, it's nothing new. It's easy. You've heard this time and time again, and I can just only roll myself into all of the people that said is ask open-ended questions. They lead to amazing conversations, right? But let's not stop there. There is something else you can do with questions, and that is fire the second dart. So you're like, what the hell is that? Well, fire the second dart is a very simple concept that you should never send a question out alone. If you're committing to asking a question, commit to always ask two. Why? It's very simple. The first question will only get you a surface level answer. You're just helping that person warm up into the topic. You cannot expect to get really deep, most meaningful questions in that way, answers in that way, because, like you're just getting into it. So you always have to fire what we call the second dart. The other reason is that it forces you and the person you're talking to dig deeper, right? And as you are digging deeper, you are showing a true, genuine interest in them and true curiosity. So the most beautiful thing about that second dart is that it's so easy to do because they are not specific questions. They're almost always placeholder type of questions like the one you're seeing here. What makes you say that? Why is that important to you? Like, what's your favorite thing about this, right? So it's powerful. Let me give you guys an example of how we would do this, okay? So how do we do that? We do that by hunting for the hooks that allow us to ask that second question, to fire it off. I'll give you an example here. So this is a conversation all of you probably had at one point or the other in some form similar to this. Hey, it looks like you work really hard, right? I could tell you, you work a lot. I work hard too. What do you do to recuperate? A very simple first line question based on the notion of curiosity. Well, the answer is actually, I really enjoy rock climbing when I can go out. Right now, unfortunately, I'm stuck at home, but that's what I love doing, is the answer you might get very logical. You already see the answer we gotten is pretty shallow, although it's an interesting hook. Rock climbing? Really? So the next question is, really? That's interesting. I don't rock climb, but I think it's intriguing. How did you get into that? Right? And you can only imagine how that conversation will go further and will reveal something that at the minimum is entertaining, but in most cases probably connecting in some way or other. So let me take you guys through a real deep example. This example we produced, it is artificial, but it could really happen. And I think it serves a really good point of showing you how you can guide conversations deep, fast. And what we mean with deep, fast is really is that these deep conversations don't need 45 minutes of your time. They can be held within 3 to 5 minutes, easy. And this is one of the things where I want you to deploy this is through the water cooler chats we have. Now we're doing them virtual, but they should still happen like they did before, right? And so the story here is, a scenario is, let's assume you are a male or a female, I don't care, CEO of a company, and you're talking to Alex, who's a growth marketer in your organization, right? So you walk up to him, you run into him at the coffee place or meet him in the virtual lunchroom, and you're like, hey, you know, what are you working on these days? Right? And then the answer you get from Alex is, well, right now I'm focused on reassessing our SEO setup. For those that don't know what SEO is, it's a search engine optimization. It's basically making sure that your links show up as high as possible on the page. And you know, the new algorithms changed pretty dramatically recently. And so we got a lot of work to do ahead of us. But I'm looking forward to that challenge. It's sort of like the answer you get. And you can see the answer is shallow. You know, and talking to the CEO, you're a little bit careful. You're also kind of jockeying to position yourself. So that's what you get. So what you need to do next is fire that second dart. And that is like, interesting. You sound very passionate about this type of work. Is that right? And then Alex answers with this. Yeah, I think SEO has always been really fun for me. Right? I really like it. And then again, another dart. Let's fire it up. Right? What do you think it was that caused you to be so passionate? And now interesting things will happen, right? Now, all of a sudden, you're going to get a lot more depth to the answers you're getting. Like in this case, it's like, honestly, you know, I like proving people wrong. You know, a lot of people right now say SEO is dead or dying. I don't believe that. I think it's still one of the best ways to drive traffic. And I really enjoy trying to solve that particular puzzle, right? You always get to try new things and see what works. And I enjoy that. Sort of that's what Alex is answering now. Now you have a nice, deeper conversation, a meaningful conversation going. Let's see what happens next, right? So you will respond with a positive exclamation of saying, oh man, I love that, right? And then you ask, where do you think that came from? Your desire to solve puzzles, you know, that really resonates with me too, by the way. You know, you already seeding the point that there might be something you have in common. All right. So now the answer is, well, you know, when I was young, my father and I used to spend almost every evening working on puzzles, big ones, small ones, right? At first, I mostly watched. He was so much better at me. But as I got older, I got faster and better. And to be honest, I really think I'm a little addicted to puzzling in some way or other. You are going to use that hook, right? And you say, oh, yeah? You know, what makes you say that? And then you go deeper into it and you say, well, I remember one time my parents caught me well past bedtime, hidden under my bed with a flashlight and working on a puzzle. I guess I just enjoy working on challenging things these days in some way or other. And so now basically you set up your own connection point by saying something like this, right? You say, hey, I definitely can see why you talk that way. My experience is a bit different, but not that much. For example, when I was a kid, I was asked by my dad to clean up the garden shed. And instead of getting to work, I drew a picture of the garden shed and took inventory of everything that's inside. And then I used that to basically decide where it went. It took me way longer than it should have, but you should have seen the results of the shed afterwards, right? It looked great, right? So that is an example. I used basically less than 3 to 5 minutes to explain that conversation to you. That's how a conversation can go really deep, relatively fast, and in a fantastically connecting way. So let's take a let's look at the key takeaways, right? You all notice we started off pretty shallow. What are you working on these days, right? But then we took it deeper. And as we took it deeper, there are a few things that happened that I think is very, very powerful. Number one, you as a CEO, you learn 3 things about that person that is joining you, that needs to continue to follow you, that is actually exceptionally powerful for you to continue to motivate them. You know that this person is contrarian, likes to prove people wrong, has a little bit of bite to him or her. Number 2, that she loves problem solving and that she likes learning new things. And if you know those things, you can always articulate new responsibilities, new projects to that person in such a way, allowing you to give that person a lot more meaning to, a lot more meaning to the work or the new project they have to work with, hopefully resulting in a lot more benefit. But most importantly, in my view, what you've learned from this key takeaway is that both of these people found something they had in common. You know, my experience was different, but not by much. You and I have that problem solving, that structuring, that figuring things out thing in common. And that's really important. And that's why I want to get into this topic of understanding the power of common ground and how to leverage it. And to do that well, I really have to take you guys back in time to the concept of us living in caves 100,000 years back. And back then, basically, survival meant a few things. To survive as a species, we had to do a few things right? Look at our bodies. It's not very strong. We don't have big teeth, right? How did we survive in a world where there were a lot of predators out there? Well, the way we did that is by living in a tribe. We had to be very good at identifying our tribe. Then we had to be very good at collaborating as our tribe. Our brain is exceptionally good at processing relationships. That's actually what most of our brain is built for, and why it is so big. It uses a lot of our metabolic resources, about 20% of what we use to just run. It's very expensive. Well, why? Because it allowed us to collaborate and do teamwork and hunt as a tribe. And therefore we were able to take down buffaloes and mammoths and so on and so forth. And thirdly, we had to defend the tribe, right? And here is what happened. Those that succeeded in doing that really well survived. Those that didn't, they died, right? And if you are like me, you believe in evolutionary theory, then basically we have to accept that the fact that our genes today are based on those that survived, those that did really well in identifying a tribe and collaborating well with each other and defending that tribe, right? And so if you like it or not, no matter how modern we are still tribal thinkers, right? Tribal thinking is still a fundamental part of the human condition, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, because our OS, our operating system up here, doesn't get updated every year like your Macs and your PCs might do, right? And so that's the reality of what we have to learn to live with. And the better we do that, the more we can succeed in the world out there, and the better we can deliver deeper, more meaningful interactions. However, the most important thing that we have to realize is that today's tribes are actually quite different, and there's a powerful opportunity in that. Modern tribes, unlike those 100,000 years ago, is that we don't belong to a single tribe anymore. We belong to hundreds, if not thousands of them. The examples are endless, and I don't have time to go through all of them, but we like movies, right? We like trail running or long distance running. You might be a gadget geek like I am, or some of us, I would love to see a raise of hands who likes wine, right? Like we're part of these tribes now, right? The list goes on, but the fact is that we're very tribal. And so what we need to do is utilize that to deliver better, more meaningful experiences. And we do that by finding this notion of common ground, because common ground is that key, the key ingredient, if you will, for us to feel connected to other people, right? So when you find common ground, what will happen is that other people will look at you and they will say, hey, he or she is one of mine, right? He or she is a member of my tribe. And the more you are thinking about that, the more aware you will be of how often you actually do that, not just monthly or weekly, but daily, right? And here's something very important. When you find common ground and you are identifying people of a tribe of, I like drinking wine, you like drinking wine, what happens is that your brain is thinking a certain thought, and that is that you think, oh, I am like you. And vice versa, that person will think, oh, I am like you too. And see, what we need to understand is the way our brain is processing that thought is fascinating, because it is nothing else but I like you. I am like you is equal to I like you. It is how likability works. And if you have a friend who is just like, raise a hand if you have that. I want to see how many people will say yes to this. If you have a friend who is like always likable, he walks in the room and everybody loves him. We have these people. The only thing that this friend is good at is finding common ground with people. That is also what the famous Bill Clinton did in terms of making people heard. He listened. He had a huge amount of curiosity. He showed that very genuinely, and he looked for common ground. All right. So how do we do this common ground thing? Well, there are two types to think about, right? Number one is the low likelihood common ground, but the strong connections, right? It's this very unique, specific stuff that we all have inside of us, right? So for example, if you want to find common ground with me, that is like if you've participated in a 10-day meditation retreat, in a silent meditation retreat in a Buddhist monastery in Thailand, you and I would have something very powerful in common, because it is a very bonding experience, right? But there's other things like home birthing for some, or brewing beer. It's sort of this unique stuff. Very powerful, but unfortunately not very useful, because we don't have it that often. If you do have it that often, and you will be all nodding, it actually feels exceptionally bonding. So looking for that doesn't hurt, but it's very hard to find it. The second thing is basically the high likelihood of a tribe, but a bit of a weaker connection. Those are ones worthwhile really aiming for, because they're easier. They're more the broader interest, more the common one. And of course, this is a spectrum where you can have number 2 to number 1. There's all sorts of stuff in the middle, but the weaker connection ones are basically like hiking. I would argue that if you look in your network right now, of all the people 60% of them probably enjoy hiking. Right? So that's a tribe that a lot of people belong to, that you can basically illuminate and find out, right? It could be college football, it could be all of those things, right? So long story short, when you have these conversations, literally make a cognitive effort of trying to find these common grounds, dig them out. They're more powerful than most people think, and they're totally underutilized. Now, what happens if you can't quite do all of that? Well, what you have to do is just simply be okay with that. It is not always possible to find common ground, and at one point you can't bite yourself too deep into it. What you will need to do is just let go and do the next best thing. The next best thing is you find something intriguing. If you can't find something intriguing, you find something that's at least interesting, and you dive in with questions there. Why is that? Tell me more about this. I've never done this, and so on and so forth. And then you do something different. If you can't find something interesting, find something that's different. And that's where curiosity can be very, very powerful, because it might be that you uncover a few tribes you've never heard of that you probably would like to be in, right? And so that's why common ground is so powerful. And even if you can't find it, there are plenty of ways where you can use curiosity and the art of questioneering to get deeper and more connected. Guys, let's get into the real deep stuff right now by talking about one of the ways you can actually deliver the most powerful experience, and that is by deploying empathy in a very skilled way. We call that gaining the skill of empathetic eminence. So what is empathy? Empathy is basically the ability to see, this is the most pragmatic version of empathy for us. Empathy is the ability to see through the world through the eyes of others. And the most important thing is that most people think empathy is something you have or you don't, like you're very good at sports or you're very good at math. You either do or you don't. That's not one of these things. This can be learned. It is like a language. You can choose to learn it, and you can become exceptionally good, no matter who you are and what your skills towards EQ is. And that's part of what we try to do. We try to train people to do this, and we do this by teaching how you become more empathetic. And the first thing you have to learn is to listen really well. Empathetic people speak only after they carefully have heard, not just listening, heard. By hearing, you are making other people feel heard, and that is one of the biggest gifts you can give to anybody around. Let's face it, right? So you do that beyond the questioning, right? And then being truly curious, you keep eye contact. You don't be distracted. You let them finish. You do not interrupt them. When they are finishing with a point, you ask yourself in your head, have I truly understood them correctly? Or am I assuming I understood them? If you're not 100% sure, if there's a little inkling of doubt, simply use that time to repeat what you've heard. So this is what you said. Is that right? This is what I've heard. And by repeating it back, you are showing that you actually listened, that they were heard. And if you got it wrong, it gives them an opportunity to calibrate you. Very powerful. The second thing is, the second skill is to then, once you've really heard, you go and express your perspective on that particular topic. What you're going to do is you're going to share how you would feel if you were to go through that same situation. Keep in mind, most people think empathy is important when something bad has happened. No. It's true, but just as important, you have to give it when something very, very positive has happened. You can be empathetic in that way too. So what you do very pragmatically is you put yourself into their shoes and you imagine as if you imagine yourself as if you are the person who's experiencing this. And then you run through this. It's a thought process. But here's the interesting thing is neuroscience has proven over and over again that there's very little difference between the actual experience of living through something and the process of just thinking through it. For our brain, it's almost as if the experience has happened. And that's why a lot of high potential athletes are, also doing mental exercises where they're going through the process of the emotions that they have to do and become better. So you do the same. You can do the same. And what you let happen is that you see what emotions arise when you are going through the same situation. And then all you have to do, empathetically speaking, is deliver the emotions you're experiencing, voice them to the person and describe them. It's just that simple. Now, let's get into a very specific example I have for you guys. And that example is this one. This is a real email I've gotten. This is an email I've gotten from John, and he's basically letting me know that he shut down his company, that it didn't work out, and so on and so forth. It's a pretty sad situation. It's the toughest thing that a founder has to do, to give up on something that they were so passionate about. So let's take a look at how a empathetic person, somebody who's skilled in empathetic immanence, would respond. This is the email that I sent to him back. All right. So I got the notice you guys are shutting down Rappel. What a bummer. But I'm sure you had a bit of weight lifted off your shoulders the moment you've made that decision. Let me know what's up for your next adventure. I assume you're going to take a break, but don't hesitate. Let me know if there's anything I can help. Right. And so let's dissect this a little bit. Right. One of the first sentences is this one. Is like, I'm writing how I would feel if I had to shut down my company. I went through this exercise real quick and I'm like, oh God, I feel also a little bit of weight lifted, right? Then I basically say, hey, look, let's move away from the shitty past of having to shut something down, from the bad news, and move towards a brighter future. What's coming up next? Then I'm saying, empathetically, hey, I would probably want to take a break. And I also want to give him an understanding and saying, look, I think it's okay for you to take a break, right? So I see we're going to take a break, right? And then, of course, the last thing I do is I offer help in the most genuine way I could. Now, do you guys notice one thing that I didn't do here? What I didn't do is I said, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Why? Because people think you're empathetic, but you're not. At best, you're sympathetic, but basically, saying I am sorry is basically from the outside in looking at the situation. And I don't think it makes many people feel good when you hear from somebody else say, oh, I'm sorry for you. Why? Because I don't have it. I'm not with you in that boat. I'm not part of the tribe of people that failed or had to stop, right? And so my recommendation to you is never, ever say I'm sorry. Always try to say, what else could I say than I'm sorry? And you'll see it's really hard to do. I even catch myself saying I'm sorry sometimes. Now, what is really cool about this example is that I got an answer, and this is what I got. Thanks, Patrick. He says, yes, bummer, comma, yes, weight lifted, and yes, going to take a bit of a break. You're 3 for 3. how you do it, right? So the beautiful thing is that basically with this example, I literally hit everybody on the nail in this particular aspect. Okay. And so the last tip that I have for you around empathy before we get to some real tactical stuff is a triggered habit. Practice empathy by looking at news that you read or stories that you get or experiences that people voice through you, even in social media, and ask yourself, how would I feel in that situation? What would I feel in that situation? And go through this process of building up this muscle of being very empathetic. And so while we're talking about triggers, I want to talk to you about my last big tip. And this is probably the most pragmatic I have for you. And that is basically doing what I call triggered touch, touching people in ways that are triggered. It's beautiful because it's easy. Something hits you, it's a trigger and allows you to touch people. And the idea is very simple. You read news on TechCrunch, you read news on LinkedIn news, you get emails, you see something on Instagram, Twitter, it doesn't matter. Something triggers you about somebody else. And I want you to learn to react to those things in the most skillful way. So I have a few tips for you on how to go about doing that. Number one is the joy of success of others. We're really horrible at that because we always have that little bit of envy. But if you can become a person who can truly celebrate other people's success, you're going to be one that people will simply love, right? So this is an example where a former client of mine, I saw news about them giving 51,000 trackers away to Atlanta who just had lost the Super Bowl. I thought it was an awesome idea. So basically I chose to say, hey, this is great. This is a very awesome, it turned out to be a very successful marketing campaign. And so my email to him is like, hey, I saw this link. Here's a link to the thing that I saw. How awesome is that? I thought it's also so brilliant. It was creative and courageous to pull that off. Very awesome, right? So that's a way in which you can celebrate others' success and deliver a meaningful, more deeper experience to others. Now, as you do this, please do yourself a favor and be thoughtful about it and avoid the stupid congrats trap. How many people say congrats, congrats, congrats? We say it so often that it basically has gone demoted to the how are you, right? We say how are you to people when we go to Starbucks. And we're very surprised when they're saying, well, this morning I didn't do so well. My mom is sick. And so I wish I wouldn't have to be at work. We're like, wait, what? Why? They're answering what you asked, but we don't think about it in that way. So please stay away from these lightweight stuff, make it more meaningful and relevant. I got a few more examples for you, and then we're going to open up for questions. So stick around. Genuine cheerleading is just like, hey, somebody's doing something you like. It doesn't have to be so successful. And so it doesn't have to be the joy of it. Here, for example, a client of mine, he's a CEO of Techstars, or used to be, and he did something around net neutrality, which I'm very passionate about. I'm a big believer. So basically I wrote an email to him around that notion, saying again that I saw that link and that I really appreciate the way he's using his platform of Techstars to fight for net neutrality. The last tip I have for you around this is back to our power element of empathy, because what you will come across, especially these days, is not just all positive news, right? Empathy will get into the way. Sorry, negative news will come up at times. It's not all good news. And here's an example that is a while ago, but there was a VC firm called Rothenberg Ventures that spectacularly imploded because the founder did a few things that weren't that optimal. But a person that I feel very dear about got caught up in it because he was a team member of that organization. And I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, this must be very, very horrible. I would argue this is very similar to what some people in your networks these days are probably experiencing when they're losing their jobs because of this whole crisis we're in. And so the email that I then sent was, again, one that was very much focused on empathy. It's too much for me to read it to you guys, but the elements here is like, look, despite what happened with this implosion of the company, I want you to know that it has absolutely no impact on what I think about you, because I think you're just an awesome human being. These are genuine thoughts that I had about this person, right? Every interaction I've had with you was one that made me think you were someone to be watched, because you are clearly going places. Again, going towards the positive of the future. And frankly, looking back now at this, I know that he's gone places because he started his new venture fund and is doing things in clean energy, which I think is absolutely amazing. So that's basically what I have for you guys. To sum it up, before we opening up for questions, I think that Connor is going to come on line again. I gave you 6 powerful ways today in how you can deepen your experiences with people: mindset, curiosity, questioning, go for common ground, be really good in empathy, and use the things that hit you on a day-to-day basis to touch people in a more meaningful, deeper way. And so with that, I think we're going to open up for questions. Connor, what do we got?
Yeah, let me read some that we had come in. If anyone does have questions, now is the time to ask while we're answering, so please take advantage of this time. But let me see here. There is a good one that came up early when we were talking smiles. So is there a way that I can still use a Duchenne smile, one of the genuine smiles, in an interaction that I'm not really looking forward to? So if you don't have that mindset of, I'm excited, what do you do?
So first of all, while I'm answering this, Connor is going to throw up another poll. It is a very important question for us to see if you guys enjoyed this. Was the content relevant? Would you recommend it to others? So please answer that for us before you hop off. The answer to that question is that, look, there's no perfect science. Sometimes you just have a situation where you can't put the Duchenne smile in it. And that's just the answer. However, in your situation, you might not be looking towards that conversation in general as a concept, but when you're in that conversation, look for things that actually truly make you smile, that you think is funny or intriguing, right? And when you are feeling that inkling, that spark of that emotion, feed it, give it more, so that it becomes a real state of who you are. And then whatever you're signaling to that person will feel a lot more genuine than if you're trying to smile when you're not feeling it, because people will sense that. The more skilled will notice that on a cognitive level, like a person like me who's been doing this forever. I might even call you out on it. But most people don't notice it. And then all they think about you is like, there's something off with this person. And that's just never good. So don't smile at all, basically, if you don't feel like smiling, but get skillful at learning how to smile. All right.
All right, good answer. Good answer. How about if someone seems shy or they're a little bit more closed off when you're asking questions, do you keep pushing or do you just let it go?
It really depends on that situation, I would argue. I'm not a big fan of being too pushy. You know, like very often we say we're the coach for introverts because our skills are actually really matching introverts. If you feel genuine, it's going to be a benefit for that person to answer that question. You push a little harder. Sometimes it just, sometimes this is the tip that I have. What feels like true shyness and a big wall is often just rice paper, like a rice paper wall, like you have in in Japanese old school houses. And sometimes you have to push through a little bit. So I'd probe the resistance, but if the resistance is too much, back off, find another avenue. One of the other avenues is that you start asking questions around professional challenges rather than going personal in some way or other.
Good, I like that. Okay, we just had one come in while we were answering, so I'm going to throw this one at you now. So it's anonymous, so I don't have a name. They say, you mentioned allowing emotions to arise and to describe them. I think we're talking about empathy here. But what if your problem is being overtaken by emotions?
So, God, I mean, now we're getting into so I can only give you my personal answer. Right? I cannot give you advice because that is, if it's a very emotional situation. What I would do is this: I would be very, very clear about who am I talking with, and if I have enough trust in that relationship that I'm talking with, I would let it out. It's like, hey, I would call it as like, oh my God, I'm actually more emotional about this than I thought, but here's how I feel. Because at the end of the day, if those emotions are genuine, you are about to deliver the most empathetic experience you could ever do, right? You're like, hey, I'm with you. I feel like I want to cry. I am crying now because this is moving me. And so that's how I would react to that. But that you have to feel vulnerable. One of the big things of being vulnerable, of expressing empathy, is also being vulnerable. It's something I had to cut out because I didn't have enough time. But, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable. Just be careful with whom you do it. Will that person be able to respond with that really well? But I think showing emotion is a very powerful connecting thing. All right. Hey, Avery, if you're still here, thank you for the comment there. It's good to see you. I'm glad you made it. I was thinking about you the other day. Do we have another question?
Yeah, I think we've got a quick one here we've got time for. So Trigger Touch, where's the best place to find news since we're all isolated right now?
Yes. So before we jump into answering that question, I would really love to, if you could send me an email about how this was, what could be done, what would if you wanted to hear more about. That's really important. The other thing, really, really important, we're doing this. We're doing this because we want to help people right now. You know, get through the situations. We have 2 sessions, 3 sessions ready for people. If you belong to a community where you think these people will really enjoy this content or our last content, our last session, there could be all sorts of communities like professional organizations that you belong to. We've had people write us, hey, would you be willing to do this with these guys? Let us know. We're here to help. It might not always be me. It could be that Connor is delivering it. But at the end of the day, we're here to help. We want to help people through this. And we want to reach our message of how to deal with this to as many people. So let us know if you know of any organization that has members that you think would actually enjoy doing this. So I appreciate all the comments I'm getting. You don't know how much work we put into this. And so if you could shoot us email about how it felt, that's how we're getting our reward on this. So the question, can you repeat it again? I kind of talked too long.
Yeah, that's good. And just a continuation of that before we go on. Speaking of doing this again, we do have a session next Wednesday. I don't know if you were going to mention that.
Yeah,
we're
good
going
point.
to go back to our original session on productivity and connection while working from home. So if you're going stir crazy, having trouble staying focused, I'm going to drop a registration link into the chat right now for anyone. Feel free to register for that. There's going to be some similar content to what you heard today, but a lot of it's going to be brand new. We've gotten amazing feedback on it. And if you haven't seen it, we'd love to see you there.
Yes,
All right.
it's the working from home. It's a combination of how to stay connected in a disconnected world and how to really be more structured around working from home. So it's not the typical tips and tricks that we're seeing flying around to ad nauseum. It's really thought out stuff, just like the things we had today. So if you're interested or you know of somebody who wants to see it, feel free to forward that link. It's 11 o'clock. I know that you guys all have other work to do, so feel free to hop off as you do, but we're going to continue for a few more minutes to answer questions that they come up with. If you still have a question you want, throw it in, stick around. We got the time. And so now I'm going to answer that last question.
Trigger Touch, best place to find news in an isolated remote world.
You know, unfortunately, one of the best sources for that just recently shut down. So I'm really reeling to look for good places. So it's going to be a patchwork. My advice is go to where you already look for news. I don't think we're living in a news deprived environment. So wherever you go to find news, that's what I would do. So, you know, really set yourself up for LinkedIn news and figure out how that one works. You know, look around LinkedIn and seeing what people are writing about, what news they're writing about. You know, and then also it can be personal news. I saw the tweet you made on so-and-so, and sometimes you don't have to just, you know, the email could be the new fax machine basically thing. If you sometimes see something, you tweet it and you send a personal email to that person about that tweet, you're going to get a lot more attention than when you just comment on that tweet. It takes a little bit more time, might be a better experience, especially if you're empathetically thoughtful in how you go about it. But unfortunately, there's not a single great tool anymore that does this really well. By the way, before we also stop this, we are going to send an email out, and there are a lot more deeper dive videos in it around how to do questioning, more thoughts around curiosity, and so on and so forth. So definitely let me know. Okay, Connor, is this it? Should we wrap it, or did we get another question?
One more came in from Evan Ryan. Hopefully he's still online. And Evan said that because nonverbal communication has such an impact in telework or non-video chats, how do we still get empathy across?
So my biggest advice is there's no reason not to have video calls, and so do video calls. Literally, I cannot think of a single reason why you shouldn't have video calls. Yes, you could say, well, I'm living in a shared place and there are people walking behind me. I don't have a good background. I feel uncomfortable with the way. Get comfortable with it. Like, it doesn't matter. We're living in unusual times. I have a rule in my company. If kids show up, it's perfectly fine. You just introduce them. Right, that's part of that. So have the video on as my answer to that. If you can't have the video on for whatever reason, and I can't think of a reason, you need to upgrade your ability to communicate verbally. So via voice, you have to be very thoughtful about the choice of words you say and put a lot of emphasis into the voice you're putting in, right? So you do it more, you say it more, you repeat the things a little bit more so that you really bring across that, like, yes, I'm criticizing you, but this isn't an issue that I think needs to cause you a lot of distress, right? And try to avoid just sending emails. You know, the trick is there, you know, yeah, but even in emails, you can write empathetically, but there is a risk that you know, you're only firing on 7%. So you leave 93% to the interpretation of the person who's receiving it. And that's always going to be dependent on his or her emotional state at that point in time. And that's why we all have been there, that we send what we thought was an innocent email, ended up coming back with a flare mail where people really rip us a new one. And we're like, where did that come from? Well, we probably mismatched the bandwidth of communication, the channels, to the message we had, and it would have probably gone better if we had both non-verbal channels of voice and facial expressions. All right. Well, it's 5 minutes after 11. We're going to hop off, unless is there one more question, or was that it?
We have one more. I'm going to ask it because it's kind of like what we asked earlier. I want to see if you have anything you want to add to it. So yes. Miriam is asking, what if the person that I talk to in the middle of the conversation dislikes how deep the conversation is going? Stop right away, or how do you handle that situation?
That's a tough one. So the person you're talking to is disliking how deep the conversation is. I think the situation will in most cases resolve itself because the person is going to show you that and not go that deeper. You're going to get shallow answers. You're going to get one syllable answers, yes, no, that kind of stuff. You're not, like, maybe, or I don't know is a good escape route that people will use. So if you get a lot of that, you just have to give up. The person isn't ready for that. And then you move back. But if the person is sort of uncomfortable with it and feels like he or she, because of a power relationship, has to answer those kind of questions, what I would do is literally say, hey, are those questions, I would approach it with two things. Number one, I would say, here's why I'm doing this. I'm really curious. I think it's really interesting. And you take any kind of like, why is he doing it out of the question by giving a clear statement of your motivations around that. I'm just curious. I think what you're doing is awesome. And I just wanted to learn more. I hope it's okay asking those questions. But if not, please let me know, because I don't, this is for you to, share, not for me to ask. And then see how the person react. Then most people might say, no, it's okay. And then you can still go ahead and say, are you really sure? Because I don't need to ask those questions. It's just, I'm intrigued. And if you feel comfortable, do you truly feel comfortable with this? And if they then say twice yes, then, then I think it's okay, because you've done everything. You went way out of the way to basically give that person an escape route. And maybe the person is only feeling uncomfortable about it because it's not used to it, but actually really wants it. And so, at the end of the day, you end up doing it, and it's a good thing that you are doing it. All right, guys, I think this is it. I appreciate all the positive feedback. And yes, let us know if you have any organization that, would benefit from a session like this or the other one we have. And with that, Connor, are we ready to sign off?
I think we're good. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
All right. And we also got to close the poll. I'm very curious to see what people said there. All right. I'm hopping off, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
and we'll talk soon.